Are you ready?
I'm ready. Born ready.
Okay. Born ready. All
My
right.
teeth says we're ready.
Here we go. We are on episode 11 of the Enneagram Adventure podcast. Super excited about that. We are over the hump. We have made it past the 10 episode mark. Tana and I are both IEQ 9 certified coaches to use that tool to help teams develop, to help individuals develop, all those sorts of things. How's it going today for you, Tana?
Going good. Minus my voice is a little sketchy due to allergies, so I apologize for those who have to listen to me sound like Dorothy from the Golden Girls, but yeah, we're good. Outside of that,
It's all
how
right.
are you?
I am tired. It is Sunday afternoon. I am in the middle of the peak build for 70.3 that I'm doing in May. And I'm freaking tired. My legs are tired. The weather's not behaving. Yeah, this
Yeah, that makes for
th-
some cold runs, cold bike rides.
yeah. I'm like, how do people do this? Well, they don't live in the Midwest. That's how they do it.
Right.
So,
Right. Are you
yeah.
cold plunging still?
No, I probably should be, but I haven't kept up with that.
I was just
That
curious if
was
that helps you at all.
yeah, it probably would. I need to be heat prepping because it might be hot in Tennessee for this
Oh,
race. So we started doing that yesterday.
how do you heat prep here?
So as soon as I was done with the bike ride, I did not allow like my core temperature to come down. Then I
Uh-huh.
immediately went and sat in the hot tub for an hour. That just makes you feel like you want to throw up.
Yeah, that sounds
But
awful.
yes. So that's how the heat prep's gonna go. But I need to do that like every day between now and the race. Is like force myself to go sit in the hot tub until I'm uncomfortably warm. If I had a sauna, I'd do it that way, but I don't have one, so we make do.
Goodness. That
Yeah,
sounds awful. You're way
yeah.
tougher than I am. I'm way too soft for that.
We could
I
work
feel
on it.
I
One of
feel
these days.
I like drip sweat after I get off the Peloton, immediately go into the shower. Like
Yeah.
I'm uncomfortably warm.
So we're way off topic. Heat prep, race training, it's fine. This is real
Off to
life,
a good
guys.
start. Off to a good
Off to a
start.
good start. So this week we've made it through all 9 numbers. We've made it through the primer for the Enneagram. We
Yeah.
have promised to follow up with some of the other structures that we mentioned as we went through the 9 types. And so today we're going to get through as many of them as we can. We're going to start with subtypes and wings if we have time. We'll dive into interaction styles or other kind
Yep.
of parts of the Enneagram and how it works as a total system. I do want to thank people who have been like reaching out with questions, thoughts, feedback on the podcast. That's super helpful. We love hearing from you guys. Appreciate you following along on any of the social platforms, but also just engaging with us. So, those of you who have reached out with questions, we will get to them. We will do episodes about the questions you've asked, but we wanted to get through the rest of the basic structures of the Enneagram before we dive into a couple of the more nuanced things. Anything you want to add to that, Tana?
Quick shout out for all the nines that got through episode 9 last week. I heard from a few of you, and y'all were immediately triggered.
Sorry, not sorry.
So, yeah, sorry, not sorry. Thanks for grinding that one out with us. And, we love you just like we love every number, but it's fun to just like hear one of my best friends who's a 9 text me. She was 10 minutes in and she's like, I'm I'm severely triggered. Like, good news. There's a lot of work to do. Good news.
Yeah, good
Good
news.
news.
Good news.
I'm glad you're unpacking that. So, just a thank you to the nines that got through the episode. Reminder to keep engaging with us on socials or text or any of the variety of ways you can connect with us. To Holly's point, want to be able to answer all of your questions, want to hear what your experience is like from your perspective. I'm excited to talk wings and subtypes because for me, it's really helpful for people who don't quite understand the full Enneagram concept and maybe think about their number as a checklist rather than an holistic checklist, right? Like I need to be all of these things in order to feel aligned with that number. When your wings matter, your subtype matters. So it's worth the listen to completely understand how you might be showing up, what your number is truly feeling like and looking like as a whole part of the system rather than just a number.
This is where we get into a lot of people are like, take personality types, any personality type, right? Could be Myers-Briggs, DISC, Berkman, Strengths Find, whatever. And they kind of are like, oh, got it. That's the answer. And some people feel that way about the Enneagram. Got my number. Got
Yep.
it. And there's the Enneagram is a very holistic system with a lot of sort of things that make it nuanced. And we're going to get into more of those, right? Like how you can have two people of the exact same number and they're showing up completely differently that you might not even believe they're the same number. Things like that. So we'll dive into subtypes first. And we did a few, as we went through all 9 numbers, we did a few examples of subtypes and how they show up differently in different numbers. But the 3 subtypes, and the Enneagram loves things in groups of 3. So we're going to talk a lot about things in groups of 3 as we go through some of this in these structures. But there are 3 subtypes: social, self-preservation, and one-to-one. And it's not always intuitive to people what those really mean, particularly the social one. The idea behind subtypes is this is instinctual. And so sometimes when I teach the Enneagram, I will refer to this as like the hard, like the hardware. So if your Enneagram number 1 through 9 is a program, the subtype is the chip the program is running on. So if you think about that, like some of the things in the subtypes are going to be more instinctual things in terms of behaviors, in terms of how you are interacting with the world. Maybe not as much, I want to say this right, maybe not as much learned, but more like it's the intuitive driver. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think an example might be helpful as we're working through it. So I'll use my own subtype as an example. So I'm a social 2. So if you're looking at my number listed, it'll say SO and 2. So for me, the social aspect is when I enter a room of people or I am part of a group, right? Let's use let's say I'm going with my significant other to work function of his, right? We're going to a party. We enter into the room. My instinct is to try and understand what the room needs from me. And how that shows up in my two-ness could be if I'm noticing somebody's hands are full with a kid and I know that kid and I'm going to go be helpful. Like there's I'm kind of surveying the environment, right? Where it came from for me in particular is that's how I found I could identify the feelings in a room, therefore keep myself safe, right? So for me, it shows up like this intuitiveness in I could walk into a room and immediately pick up the vibe. I know who's upset. I know who's happy to be there. I know who needs what from me because of that social subtype.
I think that's a good example of how social works. And I think it's worth clarifying that the social subtype does not necessarily mean that you are a social person.
Right.
Meaning, like,
Mhm.
a lot of people will get that kind of subtype back. And there's some numbers that are more triggered by getting that back as their subtype than others. Fives, for example, I've had social fives be like, but yeah, I'm not a social person. Got it. This isn't about that you're a social person and that you love social interaction. It's about the way that you perceive your part of the group
Yep.
or how you work in the community that you're a part of. So that's the social.
So, well, I guess it's worth also clarifying that my number really has nothing to do with social, you know what I mean? Like it's completely separate.
Right.
So you could be any one of the 9 numbers and be any one of the 3 subtypes. There's going to be some subtypes that you'll hear us talk about that are contradictory to the number itself, which is important for the discussion. But moving on from social, just for clarity, my number has nothing to do with my subtype. It's how my programming is working to show up to get the core motivation of my relationships, right? I'm a 2. My core motivation is to understand and be helpful to all of these other human beings. And I have some sort of value placed on that, right? It's how I survey where that shows up and how.
And you could be, I mean, Tana and I know folks who are self-preservation twos, which that's one of the that's called the counter type of two. Self-preservation twos, it's the counter type. I don't want to like rabbit hole down that too much, but we will come back to counter type in a minute.
Yep.
I do want to describe self-preservation subtype, and it's maybe the most intuitive for people to understand of the 3 subtypes because it is how it sounds. Self-preservation subtypes are folks that are wired for that. Their primary focus is going to be making sure that their needs are met and the needs of the people closest to them, wife, children, parents. That's going to be the primary focus. And if they know that those things are taken care of, they're then able to kind of think about other things. In the world that we live in today, self preservation subtypes sometimes have trouble finding their way out of the self preservationness because everything is unstable. It's hard to find the security and the safety. We have a macro environment that's very difficult. We've survived a pandemic. You can list all the things, right, that will make people kind of retreat more into the self preservation space. And if that is your instinctual thing, there's no judgment. This isn't meant to be any kind of judgment. It's just, it's something to think about and another place for you to maybe have work and growth, right? In the, okay, like anything you would
I
add on self preservation?
I think the only thing I would add that's interesting about self-preservation is early on, Holly was certified much earlier than I was. I think you were certified for like 2 years prior to me being, or more than that, maybe being certified. And I used to think that I was really triggered by people who were self-preservation subtype to the point where I would almost have like a slight judgment about it, where I'd be like, oh, well, I think that person's self-preservation because Jesus Christ, I can't get anywhere. Like,
Yeah.
I can't move them. And it was really not the case, like, because some of the individuals that I had made that judgment about were actually not self-preservation. But I think worth noting again, it's not meant to be a box that you're put in. It's just, it's there for the rest of the tool for clarity to understand how you're showing up. So
Yeah.
try not to judge because it also sounds a little triggering,
Yeah.
self-preservation. Like
Yeah.
it's not as warm and fuzzy as social.
No. No. And it's worth also noting that similar to your Enneagram type, you have a little bit of all 3 in you. You just have one that you run as the most dominant way of
Yep.
being. And just like all of the things, the goal of this is awareness, the goal of this is development, the goal of this is growth. If you are finding yourself triggered as we go through this, it's a good indication that we should explore some growth and some self-awareness kind of stuff in that space. 1-to-1. I am a 1-to-1 subtype. Sometimes you will see this described also as the sexual subtype, which can lead like down a whole other rabbit hole. For people, it has nothing to do with sex at all. So the 1-to-1 as a descriptor is better in my opinion, but you will see that, and that's like when you see the like my number, and it's on our Instagram. If you go to our Instagram, like mine is SX is how you describe 1-to-1 subtypes. That's like the abbreviation for it. And it's
I
a
don't have the
nod.
maturity for that word today, I don't think, is
Yeah,
my problem.
that's the problem. And it's a nod back to the it in the original structure of the Enneagram, it being considered the sexual subtype. But really the thing behind that is this instinct for intimacy. That's part of how it got that. It's a desire to connect with people on a 1-to-1 level, to go really deep. That's sort of the nod to that. 1-to-1 subtypes also tend to be the most intense versions of their numbers. To 1 is the counter type of 5, and again, we'll come back to that.
Mhm.
But in other numbers, such as 8s, such as 1s, I'm trying to think of other numbers in particular where the 1-to-1 3s, I think most numbers, it adds a level of intensity to them, and in some cases can make them look a little bit like other numbers. There's
Mhm.
also this desire, 1-to-1 tend to be seeking intense experiences of some sort. That's definitely true for me. Well before I fully understood and knew the Enneagram in the depth that I do now, I was doing things like running 50-mile ultra marathons because I wanted to know what it felt like. Right? So, like, okay, so there's like a level of intensity to that, right? So I was actively seeking things that were very intense and very hard for the experience of
That's
them.
fucking wild. I just gotta say,
Like,
who does that?
I apparently I do. Yes. So and it's not to say that every 1-to-1 has that, but it could be other things, right? Like I know a
Really
1-to-1
badass,
not,
by the way.
well, thank you. I appreciate that. But like I know a 1-to-1 9 who like loves roller coasters, right? But there's an intensity to that experience
Yeah.
for them, right? Or people who like to travel or, there tends to be something that they're kind of seeking, looking for, like an adventure, excitement, or whatever it is that comes through the 1-to-1 subtype.
The 1-to-1 8 that I know takes like shopping an image to a whole new level.
Yes, I know who you're referring to. Yes.
It's-
It's the 1-to-oneness, I think that particular 8 is also feels like a 4. But that comes through right in that, right? It's this big expression. All right. So that's like the very high level basics of the subtypes with a little bit of nod to it. When you think
Mhm.
about this, though, this takes the Enneagram, and I like to point this out to people in terms of this is not about putting you in a box. This isn't like a 4-point system. This isn't
Right.
whatever. When you think about this, just the subtype and core type comes up with 27 distinctly different ways of being in the world. Just those two things. We haven't even gotten into tri-type or anything else, just that. So that really expands the Enneagram system wider than other personality kind of archetypal systems, or however you would say that. So we mentioned counter type a couple of times as we were going through that. Counter types are where the subtype and the core motivation type are, I don't want to say they're in conflict with each other, but there's like a tension between them. I'm not sure if I can remember all of the counter types like right off the top of my head, but I am a counter type. So 1 to 1,
Yep.
5, that is a counter type, meaning that the things that are most sort of normal 5 behaviors that are driven in the 5 motivation, self-preservation and social kind of align to those. And it's a really natural thing. The 1 to 1, that intensity, the desire for close connection in the 1 to 1 is counter of what's normal for a 5. So that's how we get to the counter type. There's a tension between those two things. The counter type of 2 is self-preservation because 2s want closeness. They're seeking relationship, right? So social and 1 to 1 fits in with the behaviors most common for 2s, whereas self-preservation and that desire for safety, security, etc. can feel counter to the 2. Social is the counter type of 8. And
My
that
husband
again,
can relate.
yeah, that sometimes one of, I don't want to trigger any of my 8 friends by saying this, but I really love social 8s because there's the social, that sort of way that they think about how they fit into, protect and take care of a group, like softens them a little bit. It knocks a little of that barbed wire off the marshmallow. Sometimes I've heard them talk about or Enneagram teachers talk about the social 8 being called like the bear. I mean, it's like soft and fuzzy, but still like protective and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I often find my husband in some groups is often the one that's like sought out for advice, as an example. So I would agree with that. With him being a social 8, he has a different ability to channel a healthier version of himself and kind of get a little bit more in touch with the needs of that group
Yeah.
rather than being stuck.
Some of the best leaders I've worked with have been social 8s because of that, the way that they think about groups and the way that they lead that. Yeah. So the counter type of 1 is 1 to 1.
Yep.
Again, we have in that case it's the 1 to 1 subtype of a 1 makes them very intense. It kind of makes them look like an 8, and they can be mistyped as an 8. I should have mentioned that on the 5. The 1 to 1 5 sometimes gets mistaken for a 4. But the 1 to 1 1, super intense, very driven. It can get expressed like this desire to perfect the people around them. So they still have that harsh inner critic. The self-preservation 1, though, has maybe the most internal harsh inner critic, and they're constantly wanting to perfect themselves. The 1 to 1 is wanting to perfect others, like as a how do I perfect you, other
Yep.
person. And so they
Yep.
drive a little of that perfectionism out. Social 1s, it shows up like I need to perfect this group that I'm a part
Mhm.
of. It could be policy writing or rules or
Yep.
things like that. So other counter types.
Countertype to 2 is self-preservation, and that's a little bit of an obvious countertype because the 2 is trying to be helpful and finds their worth in relationships, so self-preservation and keeping themselves at the forefront of that is the countertype to a
Yeah.
2.
Self-preservation, is that also the counter type of 3?
Self-preservation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So that's kind of what like a self-preservation 2 might look like the mama bear more often than a traditional social 2 or 1 to 1 2. They might be overprotective of their people or their circle or
Yeah.
themselves. They don't get really defensive.
Yeah.
Um,
They could mistype as a 6.
yes, yes. And already talked about social two. I'm a social two, looking for what the group needs from me. And then a one-to-one two. I don't really know many one-to-one twos, actually. And I think it's interesting because twos want intensity in their relationships anyway. So that might even be a double down for a two. I find myself really having a lot of really close relationships with people who are one to one, probably because, like, as a two, I'm innately seeking that, like, intensity in relationship and I tend to overshare, right?
Yeah. In the three, though, so if threes are also, the counter type is also self-preservation, that might take a little of the competitive edge off the threeness in some ways, although I say that out loud and then I think, I can think of examples where that's not
Um,
true.
I
It's
think they're
true. Yeah.
seeking vanity. Like they might double down on vanity, right? Like, or overemphasize that charisma and like how they're showing up.
It's an interesting counter type there too, because that desire to like be competitive and be seen and be recognized and have that image, the self-preservation, there's like a conflict with that, right? Like they want all
Yep.
of that, but it's sort of like, but they want it in secret,
Yep.
kind of.
Yep.
Yeah. We talked about that in the three episode. I won't go back through the example, but right, it's like the three doctors and the cars and all that. So counter type of, we still haven't covered the counter type of four.
War is self-preservation.
Four is also self-preservation. This this is interesting. I know self-preservation fours are sometimes called the sunny four, and they still have all the big wide emotions that fours have, the desire for uniqueness and all of that. This doesn't take any of that away from the core motivation of numbers, but it does sort of have them not maybe not express the emotion in the same way. They kind of double down on the safety kind of thing. And I have had self-preservation fours in the past talk about being actually mistaked for ones.
I could
Yeah.
see that. I could see that.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a common mistype, but I do know of a couple just that was true for them. So,
Five we talked about.
five we talked about, one we talked about, eight we've
Six,
talked about, six. The counter type of six
one to one.
is one to one, which makes a ton of sense if we think about what we've described. And if you listened to the six podcast, the sixest six is a self preservation six. Those things are
Yeah.
very similar. And so a
Mhm.
self-preservation six is going to double down on some of the sixy things. But the one, that desire for the intensity, the desire for closeness and some of those things is not going to play it. That is going to create tension for the one to one six for sure.
Yeah, I think the one to one six could show up like I need to be really brave because they trust themselves inherently more than they trust others. So if you think back to the sixth episode where we talked about counterphobic
Yep.
sixes, this will make a lot more sense. But it's this push and pull, right, that we're talking about of they want they want to be able to feel safe. They want to be able to feel like they have everything under control. And that one to one is going to feel very push and pull for them because, like I said before, they just do not trust others more than they trust themselves. They
Yeah.
feel like they can only count on themselves.
I would say too, if I had to guess, and I don't know personally, I don't think I know any one to one sixes.
They
But
might show up like an eight. It might read eight.
yes. Well, like a counterphobic. I was just gonna say, I bet most one to one sixes are also counterphobic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Because it would play right into that like intensity of experience, rejection of authority,
Yep.
and that's where it would look like an eight.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got that. Let's
Seven.
7, counter type of 7.
Social.
That is so interesting,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But I guess if I really think about it, it makes sense. A social 7, so sevens and their desire for freedom and like spontaneity and all of that, a group could hinder that for them.
Well, think about it, right? I can't really think of a better word for this, so I apologize to all this ahead of time, but social 7, you can't be selfish. So there's kind of that like anti to the immediate, like, I'm a 7, I don't want to feel pain. I don't want to feel any of these
Yeah.
things. They're considering the group and what the group needs from them.
Yeah. Don't tie me down. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that social could kind of tie them down for sure.
Yep. Yep.
Whereas if you're one to one, that makes sense to me, in terms of not being the
Again,
counter type, and the self-preservation for sure makes sense to me too for not being the counter type. Okay.
social 7 might also read like a 2.
Yeah, could read like a 2.
This
What?
is why type is important.
Yes.
It's not
And it
about
does,
being about motivation.
yeah, and they're still seeking the freedom, but they're gonna have this lens about the groups that they're a part of.
Yep.
So then I think we haven't covered the counter type of 9.
Social.
So
Yep.
also social. Makes perfect sense actually to me. Also in the
Yeah.
9, Aaron is a self-preservation 9. I'm trying to think if I know any social 9s.
I do not know any social 9s.
I don't think I do either. In the counter type of 9, that social aspect again would cause tension from the standpoint of if we're if we're driven to keep peace, to keep the harmony, all of those sorts of things, that social subtype adds just a layer of complexity for them in that way.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is a social 9. So we're fresh off of our 9 episode, and where if you got a chance to listen, we talked about 9s potentially losing themselves in others. And so I can see how social would be a counter type for 9 because that doubles down on that ability to lose yourself in what the group needs from you.
Yeah.
So again, a social 9 could read like a 2 or maybe even a 3.
Yes, as opposed to the one to one is going to have that intensity for experience. We've already talked about that. And then the self preservation is going to, have
Yep.
that drive to take care of things. And I can see that with Aaron being self preservation 9, I can see that
Mhm.
come through and how he likes to take care of things and make sure things are lined up, whatever. All right. So that's the very, very basics of subtypes and countertypes. So we also promised to talk about wings in terms of a structure. I will be very honest that wings is probably the least interesting, like, Enneagram structure to me when you compared to subtypes, lines, tri-types, interaction styles. To me, wings is a little bit like, okay. But within the Enneagram system, every number has 2 wings. The 2 wings are the numbers adjacent to your core number on the Enneagram if you look at the whole circle. So I just wanted to, 9's wings are 8 and 1. So if you were to like put the 9 numbers on a circle, it's the 2 next to your core number always. So if you're a 2, it's always 1 and 3. If you're a 5, it's always 4 and 6. It cannot be that you are a 3 wing 7.
Right.
That does not work that way. I think it's good to clarify that because sometimes folks will get reading on the internet and they'll think, oh, I'm a wing, just like what I just described, a 3 wing 7. I must be a 3 wing 7. Well, no, that doesn't actually work that way. 7 could be in your tri type, certainly, but cannot be your wing.
How do your wings show up? Because mine are, so if you take the IQ 9 Enneagram assessment, you get to see how much of each number you are, right? And you also get to, this will be another thing we talk about at some point, but thinks like, acts like, feels like. I find my wings really interesting because of where my numbers stack up and that totality of the 9, because I am a 2, which means I wing 1 and 3. And my second highest number on the Enneagram is 3. So if you were to look at, I would definitely say I wing 3 significantly more than 1, but I am an acts like a 1.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
it's very closely tied within my triangle, which says my behaviors are very high in that area. I'm so close on 3. I think I'm within, I think it's like 5 to 7 if I look back at when I originally took it. I'm within like 5 to 7 points of being matched evenly between a 2 and a 3. And the way that shows up for me, for example, is my ability to adapt to whomever. Like it's chameleon-ish for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's also like that high drive and wanting to achieve, wanting to be a winner, wanting to be what's my next thing I'm going to do. So I would say that probably at work, I show up more like a 3 at times than a 2.
Well, and you're social too, and social
Yep.
twos also show up like threes.
Yep. Yep.
So that makes sense. For me, the wings, I'd have to go back and look at it more closely. But I think as I've done a lot of deep work on myself, the way that I utilize the behavior in the wings is different. We talked about this a little bit, I think, when we talked about sixes or fours, or maybe both. But those are my wings, right? Or sixes and fours. And I will tell you that when I was younger, and there are some varying theories within the Enneagram teaching circles about wings, and we can talk about those a little bit more here in a second. But for me, when I was younger, I definitely leaned into the 6 wing and the 6 behaviors. The worst case scenario thinking, the planning everything out, contingency plans for everything. There was more sixness, I would say, probably coming through my 20s and early 30s than there is today. I would have told you that was dominant for me. As I have gotten older, as I have unpacked my own self limiting beliefs, as I've gone through childhood traumas and unpacked all that with Brandon, I have found it much easier to lean into the 4 side, to sort of allow there to be feelings, to not overthink as much, to have a little, I don't want to make it like 4s accept everything as it is what it is, because that's not necessarily, I think healthy 4s do. But finding
Sure.
my way into a little bit more of that sort of more acceptance, desire for creativity, more more of the positive sides of 4, I guess, coming
Mm-hmm.
through. And I also just see them in general in terms of like things that are more important to me as I've gotten older. It feels less important. I don't know, maybe when you turn, maybe all the things they say about when you turn 40 and how you're like, I don't give a fuck anymore. Like some of that is true. I don't totally believe that to be 100% true. Some of that's true. And so maybe that's also playing into the 4 that I'm as I'm like reaching a different phase of life, it's a little bit more acceptable to allow those things to happen than it was before.
Sure. I think it's a good point because generally speaking, and this is something we haven't talked a ton about, is like I think my belief today is that your number will not inherently change unless you have significant trauma that happens to you.
Right.
That like
Right.
dramatically shifts how you move about the world in terms of your core motivation, right?
Yeah.
But the work is really in the wings and the rest of the 9 numbers. So I think that the self-awareness of it, as a reminder again, is important. It's not excuses that we're making. It's this real understanding and rationalization for why we do the things that we do in a way that will allow us to move in a healthier way.
Yes, that's a good point. And I think it's probably a good place to touch on the theories behind wings a little bit too. the theories can be, one theory, I just described it in my own experience. And so I subscribe to that theory and believe it to be true, and it's true for me. And that is that at one point in my life, I leaned real heavy on 6. That was necessary for where I was. As I've like grown as a person, done my own work, unpacked my own baggage, I've been able to lean on to the other wing more
Mm-hmm.
heavily, whereas maybe I rejected some of those things before. So that's one theory. The other theory is that you have the two wings and you lean on them equally, and that you're very balanced and that you use them both, and you use them both equally in terms of the behaviors, in terms of how you show up in the world, in terms of how you navigate and adapt and then the last theory, which I do not subscribe to this theory as much, but some people have found it to be true for them, and that is that you lean real heavy on one and that you just never find your way out of, depending on the behaviors of that wing to help you navigate life.
Yeah, I think uh, my personal experience, even in doing deeper work with Brandon, is reconciling the ick that I have in how heavy my 3 is, where it's, I think it was in conflict for a while with what I perceived to be my values. It's kind of like that wrestling with intent over impact, but like within myself from a 3
Yeah.
perspective. So it's been reconciling what that looks like for me and how I can still achieve things and be more and take on more and do all of that stuff, but in a way that's more in line with where I need to be able to put my head on my pillow at night and feel like I've done the right thing, you know? So mine is more reconciling the ick of like, I'm a high 3 anyway, so I lean that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Threes
All
don't give
right.
me the ick. My threeness gives me the ick.
Which I think it's because the 3, there's some things between 3 and 2. While it's a wing, the core motivation of the 2, right, around being helpful, being loved for being helpful, showing up, caring for people, all of that sort of stuff there, that's part of where the ick comes from for you, is that when the competitive side that maybe doesn't have as much of that starts coming up, then you're like, oh, this feels terrible to me. Why am I like this? Yeah.
Yeah. Why am I the way that I am?
And I think that's too, for me, that's in the, it's the, that was the rejection of the 4, right? The
Hmm.
5 was very, 5s and 6s tend to be logical, thinking about things all the time, overthinking, to be clear.
Hmm.
And those are, 5s and 6s are tied closer. They're both in the thinking triad. Another reason why they're tied. Like, you could lean into that a little bit more. And so for me, it was a rejection of the fourness, the feelings, the I don't think I ever rejected like the creativity side, but there were things that's like, well, isn't logical. And so I like would reject it because it wasn't logical. So it's been able to like go back to that place and like understand the benefits of allowing the feelings.
I sent it to you this week, but Suzanne Stabile posted a reel on her Instagram about 5s. And it's like, you're never going to be able to pull a 5 into your emotional context. I'm like, I feel so seen right now. Like I will be like out of my skin telling Holly something, like just unglued. And she's just like so even keel. And I'm
Yep,
like,
got it.
aren't you fucking pissed too? Yes.
It just might take me a minute to get there. One. I think
That's
it's
probably
in
also why
yeah.
I call you. That's probably why I call you when something like that happens. You'll be
Yeah.
like, well, have you considered? And I'm like, no,
No.
no, I have not. But I'm really angry. I think it's interesting. If anyone who's listening does not follow Suzanne Stabile, follow her. She's posted especially great content this week.
Yeah.
Um, and you will learn so many tidbits of information and you'll have so many seen moments. So follow her
Yes.
if
Follow
you're
her.
interested in the Enneagram and you'll learn a lot.
I'll just while we're on her topic really quick, she also has a podcast called the
Yes.
Enneagram Journey,
Mm-hmm.
I think. I think it's called the Enneagram Journey.
Yep.
Anyway, also worth checking out. She does that with her son, and they interview different folks. Okay, so we've made it through subtypes and wings. Do we want to jump on interaction styles real quick, like?
Are we going to be able to get through it?
I think so. This isn't a super deep structure.
Okay. Yeah.
Interaction style. Okay, so interaction styles are based on some psychological work that was done. I don't remember exactly when, but it is based in some psychological sort of research and science, and this idea that there's three basic types of people in the world: those who move towards other people, those who move away from other people, and those who move against other people. And that essentially walking around in the world, there are these three basic ways of interacting. That's where interaction style is based on, is in this kind of body of work. So the way that breaks down is you have within the Enneagram 3 withdrawing numbers, 3 assertive numbers, and 3 compliant numbers. If you don't like those words, I don't have a better word for withdrawing. So if you don't like that word, I'm sorry. But if you don't like assertive and you prefer a word like aggressive, those 3 numbers could be seen as aggressive. In compliant, the word just left my brain of what the other word is for the compliant numbers.
Agreeable, passive.
Maybe it'll come to me, but there's another way to say that as well.
I'm personally triggered by compliant. I am compliant.
That's probably why you're triggered by it. But the withdrawing numbers are 5, 4, and 9. The assertive numbers are 3, 7, and 8. And the compliant numbers are 1, 2, and 6. And so it's 1 from each triad: head, heart, gut, as also falls into the compliant, assertive, withdrawing. Yeah, so that's like the basics within the very, very high level basics of interaction styles. The other thing to think about with interaction styles is this is the basic way that people get their needs met. Very basic. This can feel counterintuitive for withdrawing numbers because they're like, what do you mean? How do I get my needs met by withdrawing? I can't explain it exactly, but that is actually how it works. So, because I'm a withdrawing number, and so some of it is the pulling away to find safety, pulling away to keep the peace, right? Like, so that's how you get it. So maybe it's not as direct as that you do this to get like your physical needs met, but more your emotional, mental needs met.
Your
Assertive,
motivation needs.
yes. Assertive numbers, just like it sounds. They need something, they're gonna go after it. And compliant numbers, they tend to be very concerned with meeting the expectations of others and therefore will be compliant so that they don't disappoint or let anyone down. Anything you
Yeah.
want to add to that?
No, I think you just explained really well why I'm triggered by the word compliant. Yeah, I think it is. One thing I would add from a withdrawing perspective for you in particular is it could look like you need to think about something before you formulate a thought that you're willing to like stand in. It could mean you need a minute to digest
Yeah.
what that looked like. I think Emma thinks like a 6, so I double down in compliant pretty hard.
You have all in your tri type, are you all compliant? All compliant numbers. I'm
Which makes
all with yes.
my compliance number is like through the roof.
Yes. And I am the same in withdraw. I have all 3 withdrawing numbers. And we haven't we got we'll talk have to talk about tri type maybe next, but although people are much more interested in soul child theory than they are in tri-type, just as a side note. For me, that it is that I remember when I got back my tri-type and I learned it and I had all my tri-type was all 3 withdrawing numbers. I was actually upset. I was like, really? Really? I can't even have like a little bit? Like I can't be like a feels like a 3 so I can have a little bit of assertiveness in there? Like no, all withdrawing. Let's just double down on the fact that like shit hits the fan and I'm like jetting out of there because I got to be alone.
Yeah, no, I gotta process by myself. Yeah. And I'm like, it doesn't matter what I think. What does everyone else need? Can I be helpful in this situation? Oh my goodness. Before we wrap, do you want to hear a funny, not funny, uncomfortable two story that I had to live through today?
Sure.
So, my kids, for those who don't know, 6 and 3, two boys, they're animals, like absolute wild beasts. So they were running around today and they saw like some WWE content earlier on Netflix. So they were running around shirtless, like just being animals, right? And it inevitably always ends in tears for one of them. Like it's just a matter of time. So my husband and I both warned, like, hey, whoever cries first, you're going for a nap. Sick of it. Like we're sick of somebody getting hurt and then having to deal with it, right? This has happened many times in one day. So inevitably, little guy gets injured. He comes down the stairs. He's bawling. My son, who I'm not quite sure what his number is just yet, but we'll figure that out soon. He is like apologizing profusely, following him, going, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'm like, what happened? Little guy can't even get the words out. He's crying so hard. He's like grabbing his head, and Keegan's like, I shut the door on his head.
Oh no.
My husband and I have like fresh out of patience this afternoon, like fresh out. And so we're like, all right, it's close to nap time anyway. For once, I was early getting started on the podcast. I message Holly. I'm like, hey, I'm running early today.
Works.
They go down for a nap, right? Keegan's like beside himself, so much so that he like just puts himself to bed for a nap. And I go in there, and the work for me and parenting as a two was like allowing him to feel the feeling without fixing it. Like I cannot fix it. So I'm sitting there, like before I even walk in there, I'm like, God, this is going to be so uncomfortable. I hate this. I hate every second of it. I hate watching him cry, stomp at my heart 700 times. He'll turn into a jackass if I don't allow him to feel the feeling. So I walk in and he's like, I'm just really, really sorry. And I'm like, he's like, Daddy took my basketball hoop away. I don't know when I'm going to get it back. And I'm like, yeah, that's tough, right? And he's crying and he's like, it's all my fault. I'm like, I'm so uncomfortable right now. All I want to say is like, you made a mistake. It's okay. But anywho, we get through the conversation and he's like, I just feel like such a naughty boy. And I'm like, you're not naughty. You made a bad choice. You made a bad choice. Are we gonna shut our brother's head in a door again? No. Okay, great. You should feel bad. That was not a good choice. And yes, it was your fault. As that was coming out of my mouth, I'm like, I'm the devil. This, this is awful. But he came around and he's like, I did make a mistake. I'll do better next time. I'm like, I know you'll do better next time. I'm like, I make mistakes too. Everybody makes mistakes. You gotta do better the next time.
Yeah.
But anyway, I bring it up because it was very uncomfortable for me to allow him to punish himself in front of me, but we're doing it. We're not raising little brats. That's what we're not doing.
Yep. Yeah. Teaching the personal responsibility
Teaching a
at a
personal
young age.
responsibility, letting him feel feelings as much as I would love him to be a 7.
I'm also imagining, 10 years from now, and he's 16, and the other one's what, 13?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, 10 years from now, you have two teenagers in that house. I will bet you money that somebody's head will get shut in a door again.
Somebody's head will go through drywall.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
It's like, you got two boys.
It's guaranteed.
Yeah.
It's absolutely guaranteed. But yeah, it was funny. We are kind of like fresh into this whole stuff with like he tells on himself, which is great. Like I'm really leaning heavily into that because I don't want to have to be the detective to try to pull this out of him, right?
Right.
So we spent the other weekend writing an apology letter to the bus driver because of poor bus behavior. And this is, yeah, parenting is not for the faint of heart. But
No.
Brandon's helping me with some patience work. Great news.
Yes.
So I talked to Keegan about that. I was like, my mistake is when I yell because I get impatient. Then I feel sad because I yelled. He's like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy yelling at you. And I wonder why my voice is like this.
Yeah. It's
Allergies.
not it. Allergies. No. Okay.
Allergies. And barking at my kids.
Oh, parenting.
Yeah.
I don't have that. No kids over here. We got fur children. So I do understand getting though unreasonably annoyed. Difference is I can be like, go to your kennel, and I don't
It
get
sounds nice.
taken to
Can I
jail
go to
for
a
that.
kennel? Can I?
Yeah.
Put me there.
Put you there. It's commendable. All of my friends who are parents, I'm like, I don't know how you guys do it. Like I can barely keep my own life together. I don't know how you do it.
We do it. We don't do it well every day, but we try, you know?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
this is
We've talked
great.
Yeah. I was like, we've talked about it before, but I'll be curious, like in a household where you have parents that are working on their own emotional regulation and teaching their kids like all of the right ways to regulate and control their nervous system and all that stuff. Like
Yeah.
what just so curious how that generation will impact the world.
Yeah. I know of a few grown adults that could have used from that a long time
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. It's never too late though. I will say that. Like if you grew up in a challenged household, it is never too late.
It's never too late. Awesome.
All right. Cool. So this one was good. We made it through three structures of multiple different structures in the Enneagram. We'll keep going. Keep hitting us up with questions, things you want to know
Yep.
about related to the Enneagram. We'll keep compiling a list for future episodes. If you are willing to talk about your number and be on the podcast, let us know that too.
Awesome.
Anything else?
Thank Nope. Subscribe, like, share, all
Yeah.
of those lovely things. If anyone is interested in learning about more about their number too, hit us up. Or learning about your subtype, because a lot of the free assessments out there do not go deep into subtype, as an example, or interaction style. So,
Yeah.
interested in that, let us know.
Any of those things. All right, this was good. If you loved it, share it with a friend, tell somebody about us. That really helps us out. Leave us a review on Spotify and Apple. That's helpful too. So,
If
all
you're
right.
triggered by it, share it with a friend.
Yeah, yes.
Maybe just don't comment.
I mean, you can comment. I just might not give you anything back. I might just be like, I'm gonna just let you sit with that, my friend. You're just gonna sit in that uncomfortableness.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, cool. I will
Thanks,
talk with you
Holly.
later.
Yeah.
Bye.